Trips and Traps. Andy Serling, joined, as always, by Eric Donovan.
Very good to be here on Trips and Traps. Three races to bring you all at 1 mile on the main track, and a couple of allowance races we'll start things off with. And so we'll get things started with the 7th race on April 13th. The non-winners of 1 allowance for New York Breds going a mile.
We're not going to show you any earth-shattering trips on today's Trips and Traps show. We're just going to talk about some horses that ran in the races and talk a little bit about race dynamics and focus in this race on the two speeds, Beyond Empire and Archer Hill.
Beyond Empire was the big favorite in here at even money, a horse that won, visually fairly impressively first time out for trainer Kieran McLaughlin, and was sent up on the lead here after coming from off the pace in the first start. But the one horse that is involved in the pace here with Beyond Empire is Archer Hill, a horse trained by Lisa Lewis, who had run all 3 of his prior starts on the turf.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, he's not a horse that has shown real speed in those races as well, and he significantly seemed to alter his running style in here, and maybe it was just having the rail, but they set what was a pretty strong pace. If you want to compare this pace to the pace of the next race we show, which was run just a couple races later, this one was faster.
This is a pretty quick pace, and it does set up for the way the race unfolds. And here, I got nothing against the winner, Call for the Clock, who's really done well here over the winter and early part of the spring for trainer Mark Hennig. Seems like he's improved. Swag Daddy in the right kind of spot here, sitting off the 2 speed horses there. But these 2 horses setting the pace here really set the tone for the whole race.
Yeah, they did, except the problem is, Eric, the race didn't fall apart at all. I mean, they did get beaten almost 6 lengths, and, they end up, the pace takes toll on them. Nobody else ran. But the third horse, who's stalking right behind, Swag Daddy, ends up just getting beaten, and the horse who got the perfect trip in 4th, Call for the Clock, got it done. So the question is, did they really run that much better as it appears because of the fast pace, or was it a race where the pace semi-held together?
Well, it's semi-held together, but I thought it was a fast pace, and perhaps they did run well in here. And the reason why I wanted to do this was not so much for Beyond Empire, who was the favorite here, but the rail horse, Archer Hill, who was, had been strictly turf and, had been coming off a disappointing effort down at Gulfstream Park in his last start on the grass down there for Lisa Lewis, a horse that I think showed a little something here with that improved speed on the dirt. Whether or not that translates to a switch back to the turf in which he'll run well, or another dirt start, we'll see. But all in all, I thought the fact that he was able to hang with the favorite, down the lane off a bad race last time out, through a quick pace, doing something he's never done before, I thought that was a positive for Archer Hill. He's a horse I'm looking forward to running next time out, whether it be on turf or dirt.
Well, he certainly, I think his speed figure is probably a little bit higher than any number that he's ever run on the turf before, and so he certainly handled the dirt in here. I don't know. I have mixed feelings on this race. Beyond Empire, that horse was coming off a perfect trip win with a fair buyer. Not sure overall how good he is, but I think it was a decent enough second start. I hear what you're saying with Archer Hill. I think the thing with Archer Hill was he ran surprisingly both in his tactics and he ran surprisingly well, because there was no reason to expect him to be better on the dirt than turf.
No, there wasn't. So he's the one I'm looking forward to off the race a little bit. And I guess you could say, Swag Daddy, perhaps if he was back another length, maybe perhaps he would have won the race. I mean, Call for the Clock got the absolute dream trip.
He got a very good trip, but here's the other thing about the race. Nobody closed at all in here. Now, I'm not saying there were monsters behind them, but Junior Officer was a mediocre 5th. Game Token, who I liked, was a poor 6th. It seems like, I wonder about these races at a flat mile when you get these fast paces, yet seemingly the speeds don't collapse. I struggle with them because I wonder how much you're supposed to rely on the pace figures or sometimes just the dynamics of the race, because when the pace holds together, it's hard to say the pace hurt the horses up front. I'm struggling with this race. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I just don't really have a strong opinion on it.
All right, we'll move on to our next race now, and this also at 1 mile. That's the 8th race, or the 9th race rather, from the 13th. We're going to take a look at the 3 Incognito, who really gets in a ton of trouble at the top of the stretch and is able to wiggle his way out of that trouble and get to the winners, get to the wire first.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about showing this race, Eric, is here it is an hour later, and the pace was 23.28, 46.38. As comparison to the race that we just showed, the pace was 22.92, so they went 0.36 slower, and then 45.68, 32, 30, 0.7 slower the half. Yet in this race, and the second horse was the second biggest price on the board at 16-1. So it's not like the favorites ran 1, 2, 3. In this race, the race fell apart.
Yeah, it's just funny how it works that way sometimes. And it's a fairly contested pace here. With the horse in the lead, and then the Ford horse down on the inside, Wonderful pressing from there, and the 7 on the outside late starter. here. Incognito's in behind him, and they give Familia Darley Silks, and then Incognito working out a pretty good trip to this point.
Yeah, he's working out a good trip, and this is a horse I think that Mike Lussey, he's ridden in all his starts, and he sort of nursed him along as he's improved along the way, and he has shown to Mike that he can get a little bit lazy. And Mike, you'll see him start to get into him here, and he's done that before. I think he's trying to keep him to his business. At this point, you almost wonder, is Incognito running? Because he seems to be dropping back, but then he starts to run when they hit the top of the stretch, and that's when the trouble starts.
There's really nowhere for Incognito to go right here. Best option is to hope that he can, probably swing out into the 4 path here and go outside the 7 late starter, but that path gets closed up by the 8 Blue Creek, who comes right up alongside the Incognito here, and then Mike Lussey almost gets dropped there.
Yeah, no, that is a tense moment. And then he tries to go through this hole, and we show you the head-on. This hole is a lot tighter than it appears at that point, and he fights his way through. He's probably as much as a length behind Blue Creek, and he regathers himself, re-rallies on the inside, and you can say that Blue Creek's an inferior horse. The race got a figure in the mid-80s, the buyer, and he really fought back here. And you can see, here he is trying to go to the first hole that gets shut off, and he'll stumble there and clip heels, it almost seems. At that point, you see him bobble badly, and then he regathers, goes to this hole, but look at how tight things are there, Eric.
Yeah, things squeeze up here. I mean, it looks like he's got some room there, and then as soon as he gets right in the middle of those 2 horses, things squeeze up there. He's got to brush those horses aside and go on through to the victory here. I thought he lost when I watched the race live. You thought he had won. I thought it would have been a tough loss if you had this horse.
Especially, yes, it would have been a very tough loss if you had him. And he's an improving horse. Now, he's not running figures that are fast enough to be a major stakes winner, but he is, I think, improving with each start. And even though he got the same buyer number in this race as in his prior effort, considering the trouble in there and the more moderate pace, I think it was a very good race by him. And I imagine they're looking at the Peter Pan. I think they need to be a little more patient with him. I think that Mike felt he needed to get to that hole, and it's a tough call. And obviously, he was very adept in keeping him going, and Mike did a good job with him. And Mike's really worked this horse from the start, and I think he's helped him gradually improve. It'll be interesting to see. Is he going to be good enough to win a race like the Peter Pan?
Well, I think more distance will help him, because I don't think he's going to have to be so rushed to get in the game. The rider can just sit and kind of relax on him a little bit, let the race unfold in front of him a little bit more, and then push the button when he sees fit, instead of having to get him right up there on the pace, going a mile and a 16. He's got some talent. We'll see if he can take the step up to the next level. He's going to need to improve, another 3 or 4 lengths, I think, to be, a serious factor in any of the top 3-year-old stakes over the summer, which I think is really where you have to start looking. I mean, you can look at the Peter Pan now, but, in the back of your mind, you can start thinking about maybe the Travers or something like that if he continues to improve.
The obvious ideas with a horse like this, the Peter Pan, the Dwyer, and then you have the Jim Dandy or the Haskell, and then you have the Travers. Now, he's nowhere near good enough at this point, but I shouldn't say nowhere near it, because, frankly, he's running about 4 to 5 lengths slower than a heck of a lot of the horses that are going in the Kentucky Derby. And he's a horse that's made great strides to get there. So there's no reason to say it's impossible that he couldn't get the upper echelon of the 3-year-old division. I think he's a horse to keep an eye on, and he's certainly a horse with guts.
Indeed. One more race to bring you, a first-time starter we'll take a look at now, the number 4 Cape Song. This is a maiden special weight for fillies and mares on April 14th.
Yeah, and the first thing to show you with this race is the 4 Cape Song. Breaks a little bit slowly in here, and it is a race that's 1 wire to wire, a fairly moderate pace in here. And I think this is a horse that, a lot of people are going to see, and it was almost 14 to 1, and she's going to be much, much lower next time out. And I don't think we're covering any brilliant ground here, but I think that this is a horse that Cape Song that might be okay going down the road.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think she'll be okay. I do think she'll probably be, fairly well represented at the windows next time out, because of the trouble that she does have in this race, the fact that she was a little green, and just looks like, she needed this race probably. And, you talk about first-time starters versus horses with experience. This is one of those races that proves to you why it's so difficult to win as a first-time starter in races where horses have significant experience.
No, I agree. That's a very good point. And one of the things that frequently seems to change in these situations is with the benefit of start. And you see, and she gets put between horses. She gets good education this race, She is never in an easy sort of spot. And I thought she got a good ride from Joe Bravo. He'll swing out when we get to the top of the stretch and get her out in the clear. And you'll see she's green lugging in the stretch. A horse with 1 start, she's going to break better in all likelihood her second start, and she's going to get herself a much easier trip. She won't as likely be as green in the stretch when we look at it, and she's a horse that's going to probably win her next start at a reasonably short price, but I think she's going to go on and do more than just win her next start.
Yeah, I think she lost about a length there, getting a little bit shuffled around the turn. She gets some clear run here when Bravo was able to, switch her out into the 3 or 4 path coming for home. And she's going to, rally well here and get a little bit green in the stretch and try to duck in, lug in a little bit as they come down to the wire here. A horse that clearly will benefit from this experience and probably be much better off for it next time out.
And it's not as though anybody was doing any running really behind the leader. The leader really separated herself from the field. And this was the one horse, and you see her lugging in kind of badly there. And I think Joe really earned his money riding this horse because he had to really ride her hard. And I think it's a symptom of the fact that it's her first start and she's learning. But Cape Song, I think you're going to get rich with her in the future, but I think she may be one to keep an eye on as we head towards the summer months. Obviously, it's a tough year to be a 3-year-old filly. There's so many good ones, and we're not saying she's going to win the Alabama, but she has a chance to get herself in some good races as the year progresses.
It's funny how we're looking at horses now here in the middle of April for races in, August, July, in that range. And I think now's the time you can consider that because the horses that are running now and, some of the premier races are, they'll need a little bit of a rest by the summer.
Or they'll fall by the wayside. And this is a horse for Christophe Clement that could go on and do some good things. And her dam was certainly a very good New York bred. It won over $800,000. Trips and traps at NYRAInc.com. We can always use your help.
Thanks for watching.